There are moments when life reveals who we truly are, not in the glimmer of party lights or the shine of wealth, but in the cold, raw seconds when disaster hits. On that bright December afternoon, the rooftop of Sterling Innovations' corporate headquarters was decorated like a winter paradise. Golden ornaments sparkled under the sun, snow machines dusted the entire terrace with a glistening white blanket, and guests in designer coats laughed, sipped champagne, and pretended nothing in the world could ever go wrong. It was the company's annual Christmas celebration, and the Billionaire CEO, Veronica Sterling, wanted perfection. She had spent weeks preparing, determined to host a party so extravagant it would silence critics calling her disconnected from ordinary people. She needed this day to prove that success, luxury, and glamour could define her legacy forever. Nothing was allowed to ruin her moment. That was why, when she caught sight of the janitor sweeping near the buffet table with his faded uniform and worn-out shoes, she lost her composure. Before we continue, this story is shared by Kindness Journal. If you believe kindness and second chances matter in this world, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe so more hearts can feel hope again. Veronica pointed at the janitor with eyes sharp as glass. His name was Matteo, a soft-spoken man who rarely raised his voice and usually found comfort in staying unnoticed. He had been working at the company for 2 months after applying for cleaning jobs everywhere, desperate to support his little sister, an aging mother. His life had never been easy. He knew the smell of hospital corridors from when his father spent his final months fighting illness, and he knew the weight of responsibility far too young. Even today, he had planned to finish quickly so he could leave early and attend a small Christmas lunch at home. Yet there he stood, being humiliated in broad daylight. Veronica, towering in a bright red designer coat trimmed with white fur, snapped at him harshly, her words cutting deep. It left Matteo frozen in place, holding the broom like a shield he wished could hide him. The wealthy guests stared with awkward amusement, as if the scene were entertainment. Matteo swallowed the bitterness but simply apologized and stepped back, avoiding any confrontation. He looked away from the glittering decorations and the artificial snow that felt like a mockery of his world. He wondered how people could forget what it meant to be human. The party resumed. Music played loudly. Christmas bells chimed. Veronica stepped into the center of the crowd, gathering attention with her practiced smile. Reporters snapped photos meant to celebrate her status, her success, her perfect life. Just a few feet behind her, unnoticed, stood her 8-year-old daughter, Grace. The little girl had slipped away from her nanny, curious, energetic, and tired of the fancy adult conversations. She wore a white dress with sparkly accents that made her look like a tiny snow angel. In her hands, she held a red balloon that tugged lightly in the winter wind. Grace wandered along the terrace edge, where the decorative rails were wrapped in lights and artificial snow piled thicker than planned. She didn't notice where the platform ended and the hazard began. She didn't notice the snow-covered gap that hid an area under repair. She only followed the pull of her balloon. One small step, and the thin metal beneath the snow gave way. Grace gasped as her foot slid into the open space, and she toppled forward with a terrified cry. The music swallowed her scream. The party lights flashed. The guests kept laughing. No one turned in time, except one. Matteo, who had been stepping toward the staff exit, caught that faint sound, the desperate cry of a child. His instincts moved before thought. He sprinted across the terrace, dropping the broom. As the platform cracked further beneath Grace's body, he lunged and grabbed her arm just as she began to fall into the dangerous drop below the terrace. His grip tightened. Grace's eyes widened in shock and panic, tiny fingers clinging to his sleeve. The metal beneath Matteo groaned and bent more. He strained every muscle, fighting gravity and fear. He could feel his own foot slipping, but he refused to let go. Inch by inch, he pulled her toward him until he could lift her fully into his arms. He backed up quickly, breathing hard, adrenaline shaking his limbs. He hadn't realized how close they both had come to tragedy until he heard Grace sobbing against his shoulder. The music suddenly stopped. A wave of silence rolled across the rooftop. Veronica turned, confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere. When she saw Matteo holding her crying daughter, her face drained of color, she rushed over, heels clacking furiously across the floor. Her eyes darted from the damaged platform to the janitor, who had just saved the most important person in her universe. The crowd watched stunned. Their luxurious masks of indifference shattered. Matteo gently handed Grace back to her mother, making sure she was secure before stepping away. He tried to disappear again, tried to blend back into invisibility, but this moment refused to let him. Veronica held Grace tightly, tears gathering in her eyes despite her effort to maintain control. Her world had nearly collapsed. For all her wealth and power, she could not have protected her daughter in those crucial 2 seconds. The truth hit her deeply. She had dismissed the man who had just saved her child. She had scolded him like he was trash unworthy of the space around her. Shame burned through her chest. She called security to block off the dangerous section. Then she turned toward Matteo, her voice trembling with remorse as she apologized. Her tone lacked the confidence and authority everyone was used to. For once, she sounded like a mother before a CEO. Matteo, humble as always, only nodded and said he was relieved Grace was safe. He never wanted credit or applause for doing what his heart demanded. He simply believed every child deserves protection, no matter whose child they are. Still shaken, Veronica insisted that Matteo stay at the party. She thanked him publicly, her voice cracking as guilt twisted inside her. Guests who had smirked earlier now looked away in discomfort, realizing how quickly their praise and popularity meant nothing in the face of real human courage. The photographer who once captured shiny champagne glasses now photographed the janitor who embodied true heroism. The fake snow continued to fall, but the atmosphere had shifted. The merriment became reflection, and the chatter softened into respect. Veronica had always built walls around herself, trying to prove that power meant never showing vulnerability. Yet in this moment, she felt more human than ever. She sat with Grace on a bench near the Christmas tree, trying to calm her daughter's trembling. Matteo stood at a respectful distance, unsure if he should remain or leave. Grace lifted her head and looked at him with teary eyes filled with trust. She whispered thank you, and even though her voice was tiny, it hit harder than any applause ever could. Matteo smiled warmly, and Grace managed a small, shaky smile back. As the sun shone gently across the terrace, Veronica approached Matteo again. Her voice softer now. She asked him about his family, his struggles, his dreams. It wasn't a forced conversation or a public performance. It was genuine curiosity mixed with humility and newfound gratitude. She learned that Matteo worked 2 jobs, often barely making it home on time to help his mother care for his younger sister. He had dreams once, dreams of studying engineering, but he gave them up when life demanded survival instead. Veronica listened, absorbing each word with a heart growing heavier by the second. She realized how blind she had been. Her own success had shielded her from seeing the humanity of the people who kept her empire running. The janitor she had snapped at had more courage and integrity in one moment than she had shown in years. Grace leaned into her mother and whispered that she wanted Matteo to stay nearby. It touched Veronica deeply. She smiled at her daughter, then turned to the man who had saved her entire world. She asked him to join them for the rest of the celebration. Not as staff, not as someone expected to remain invisible, as their honored guest. The staff quickly found Matteo a fresh suit jacket, and when he returned, the crowd welcomed him with applause that felt different than before. There was admiration now, not judgment. He felt shy, overwhelmed, but also proud. He finally stood where dignity embraced him instead of pushing him aside. Food was brought to him. Grace sat by his side, still gripping his hand with childlike certainty, that heroes should never be left alone. Veronica raised a toast, acknowledging that the most valuable people in this world are often the ones nobody notices. Her voice shook with sincerity. For the first time, she inspired people not by flaunting success, but by recognizing humanity. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who deserves hope, and subscribe to Kindness Journal so these messages of compassion can reach more souls. Veronica's staff began whispering that she was changing. Reporters who once called her cold now called her courageous for admitting fault. Yet none of that mattered to her as much as the lesson she learned. Christmas wasn't about perfection or prestige. It was about gratitude, second chances, and seeing the people who make life brighter without expecting anything in return. Later that afternoon, when the sun began to lower but still lit the sky in warm golden streaks, Matteo stood to leave. He thanked Veronica and Grace for their kindness. Veronica stopped him gently. She said she wanted to offer him more than gratitude. She wanted to give him a chance to rebuild the dreams he had buried beneath responsibility. She offered him a scholarship funded by the company to study engineering, plus a full-time position afterward at Sterling Innovations. Tears filled Matteo's eyes. He had lived his whole life with silent hope, but this was the first time someone powerful chose to support that hope instead of ignoring it. He accepted, overwhelmed by a future that suddenly looked brighter than any Christmas lights could shine. Grace hugged him tightly, calling him her hero. Matteo promised he would always be grateful for the moment he heard her cry, the moment that changed everything. Real stories of kindness deserve to live on. If you are here watching, please comment. Kindness can save lives. Let your voice help this truth travel further. This Christmas party was supposed to show the world how perfect Veronica's life was, yet it became a reminder that perfection is hollow without compassion. A janitor saved her daughter, but he also saved her from becoming the kind of person who forgets what truly matters. Matteo walked home that evening with snowflakes resting lightly on his shoulders, carrying more than just a gift of opportunity. He carried a renewed belief in himself and a deeper understanding that kindness doesn't need applause to be powerful. It only needs to exist. Stories like this remind us that real heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear war, knout shoes and carry brooms. Sometimes they are the people we overlook until the moment they save everything we love. In the brightness of that day, under a sunlit sky pretending to be winter, one act of courage transformed not only a life, but an entire heart. That is the true magic of Christmas. ChatGPT can make mistakes.